There are a few things that we are not discussing as advanced players, talking to beginner players about tab, and I think it's because we forgot all the things that have happened when tab was first invented to what's happening now. So let's go over how tab is supposed to work versus how it's working now, all the things we should be recognizing within the tab, and all the things that we should be using to help phrase things or guide us in the tab. The original intention for tab was to speed up the reading process. If you're reading standard notation, there are 5 ways to play middle C. But if you're reading tab, there's only one way to play it because you're listing out exactly the string and the fret that you want them to play that particular note. The reason why it's upside down is because, one, as you get more advanced, it actually becomes easier to read upside down, but we're also trying to make sure that it mimics a horizontal fretboard, so that way it's easier for us to read. There also used to be a rhythmic part to tab, so that way you didn't have to actually guess what the rhythm was. You didn't actually have to hear the song to play the song. However, that got completely ignored by the 90s because people were just putting down the numbers, ignoring the rhythms. So make sure you're understanding that they're expecting you to know how the song sounds before you actually play it. So let's say you're a chord chart person going into a tablature or tab world. It can become very confusing because it's not as straightforward as a chord chart. Chord chart, you have the lyric and you have the chord, and make sure you're counting and you're going to be fine. But a tab world, there's a whole lot of information coming at you, and it becomes very intimidating because there's so much information. So let's start recognizing some of the things we already know inside of that tab world. So this first chord, hopefully you recognize it as an A chord. What we should be trying to do is visualize the fretboard in our minds as we are reading the tab. If I see a 0, 2, 2, 2, 0, hopefully that image pops up in my head as I am playing. So as we go through other chords like a C, notice it's kind of diagonal, D, E. These are all recognizable shapes that we hopefully can start recognizing as we're going in. Not that tabs are always going to be like this, but if we can recognize these shapes, it makes other things become a bit easier. So what do I mean by making things easier? Notice how this keeps saying the same sets of numbers over and over and over and over again. It's because they're playing the same chord, they're just strumming it. They're trying to dictate to you how in the world you're supposed to be strumming this chord. It can be intimidating because you just see, oh my goodness, there's so many numbers. How am I supposed to do that? It's the same chord over and over and over again. They're just strumming. But if we recognize the chord and see it repeated over and over and over again, we would be more likely to understand that. Another shape we're going to have to recognize is power chords, because this gets played a lot in rock and roll. So let's say we see a 3 on the E string, a 5 on the A string, and a 5 on the D string. That is a power chord. Now the way I'm recognizing that is I'm looking at the lowest number, which is 3. And then the next number, if I add 2 to it, which would be 5, and then 5, 3 plus 2 is 5. That is probably going to be a power chord. If I move it up to the 5th fret, notice now it's a 5, 7, 7. 5 plus 2 equals 7, 5, 7, 7. I'm recognizing the power chord. Even if it moves to another string, it's still a power chord, especially when you're playing things like punk rock. These are going to be all over the place. They might do a variation on it. So for example, maybe they have the 3 and the 5, and they don't have that last 5. Okay, that's still a power chord. It's just what I call a half power chord. You can also have octaves, which is they have the first 3 and the last 5, right? It's still a power chord shape. We want to recognize these because they get played so often. Now, are all shapes going to be recognizable immediately? Not necessarily. But as we read these tabs more and more often, we start to recognize the shapes because we can visualize the fretboard in our head as we are reading it. Another thing we might recognize is what's known as arpeggiation, which just means playing parts of a chord individually. So here we see a 0, a 2, a 2, a 2, a 0. Now, a lot of us would play the chord that way because that's what's written, 0, 2, 2, 2, 0. But that's not what the guitar player is playing. What they're doing is they're holding an A chord and playing each string individually. Arpeggiating like that, just meaning parts of a chord played individually, is not that wild of an idea, but it shows up in tab very awkwardly because it looks like they're doing more than what they're actually doing. So if I start to see chords that are spread out like that, let's say with the C chord with this next one, they go up and then they come back down, it makes it easier for me to read. I can just understand, oh, they're playing the C chord, they're just playing it really slowly. Now this type of arpeggiation does get kind of weird because it looks like it's random. And now if it looks like it's random, it probably is. But in this case, what I'm noticing is they're playing every other string. They're playing the E string to the D string to the A string to the G string. They're popping up and down like that. So how would I play this? Well, this looks kind of awkward. That's kind of weird. But if I smush them all together again, it looks like they're playing an E chord. They're just playing every other string on the way up. Is it awkward? Yes. Is it going to work every single time? Not necessarily. But as I get used to seeing these things, I start to see, oh, they're playing out of a chord shape, particularly in this case. Remember, not all the time, just hopefully we can see it when it does pop up. Now, many of us are confused as to which fingers we should and should not be using. And I get this complication because there's no indication for it. But I'm going to use this particular rule of thumb to help you out. So if I see, in this case, in I Can't Get No Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, I see that the numbers keep going up. 2, 2, 4, 5, 5. Well, because those numbers go ascending on the same string, I'm probably going to use my first finger on that first note and then use my third and fourth finger because I'm trying to prevent myself from moving. The more often I move, the more likely I am to make a mistake. Okay, that's totally fine. That'll work. So what if they're going the other way around? So let's say we're looking at this Van Halen idea. Well, here he's going 8, 7, 5, and he goes to the next string 8, 7, 5. Well, because he's going down, I'm probably using my third or fourth finger. 8, 7, 5, 8, 7, 5, 8, 7, 5, and it becomes easier for me to play. I'm trying to make sure that my hand is not moving. The more I shift, the more likely I am to make a mistake. Now, is it going to be like that all the time? No, that's just what I'm using to make sure I can get through the tab faster. One thing we definitely get hung up on are all the other little things, all the other symbols inside of the tab, whether we should slide or hammer on or pull off, and it gets really confusing. What I want you to understand is that is there to help you play it like the original artist. But that does not mean you have to play it the exact same way. So let's say I start to do more slides in I Can't Get No Satisfaction. Notice I sounded like the original. It wasn't exactly like the original, but I don't have to sound exactly like the original. I'm the one playing the song. If I decide to maybe do hammer-ons, okay, I did pull-offs and hammer-ons there. It's whatever I feel like doing. Maybe I have to scratch my nose in the middle of the song. Am I going to stop everyone to say, hey, no, I can't play the song anymore right now because I have to scratch my nose and it's not going to sound exactly like the original? It's not going to work like that. Maybe you want to bend it. It's whatever you want to do. These are there to help you figure out what it is that you want to do. When you're playing the song, it is now your song. It's not the Rolling Stones are going to pop out of nowhere and start chewing you out for playing their song not exactly where they recorded it. I promise you, they're going to be doing their own way when they're playing it live too. Just make sure the song sounds enough like the original so it's recognizable, and after that, who cares? Now, if there are any particular ideas within tab that you want me to go over, like how you can have better hammer-ons and pull-offs or slides or bends or whatever, let me know in the comment section because I can't help you if you don't tell me.